My mother said the word sold the way you'd mentioned the weather, halfway through passing me the potatoes, and for 3 full seconds I kept smiling because I was certain I'd misheard her. The dish was warm in my hands. The steam smelled like rosemary. And then my father added, not looking up from his plate, "It was just sitting there, Ellery." Empty houses rot, and the whole room tilted very quietly on its axis, though no one else at the table seemed to feel it move. They meant my grandmother's house. The yellow house on Marren Lane, the one Ione had promised me in her own handwriting, on paper I still had folded in a drawer 11 miles away. They had sold it. They had sold it weeks ago, apparently, and I was learning about it over dinner, between the potatoes and the green beans, as an afterthought, because it had never once occurred to any of them that it was mine to be told about first. What none of them knew, not my mother, not my father, not my brother Dax with his gym tan and his failing chain of juice bars, was that 11 months earlier I had done a very quiet thing at a very quiet law office, and that everything they had just built on top of that house was going to come down, slowly, and then all at once, and that I would be standing exactly where I was standing now, saying nothing when it did. I didn't say any of that. My heart was going like a bird against a window, but my face was Ione's face, the careful one, the one that gives nothing away. I set the potatoes down. I reached across the table. I asked for the salt. My grandmother was named Ione Marren, and the house had her name inside it, the way a shell keeps the sound of the sea. She built it with my grandfather in 1961, 2 young people and a mortgage and a lilac cutting from her own mother's yard. And she kept it for 58 years after he died. And she filled it, every drawer, every windowsill, every Saturday of my childhood, with me. Because I was the grandchild who came. That was the whole difference, and it was everything. Dax was 3 years older and made of brighter stuff, good at basketball, good at charming teachers, good at being forgiven for the things the rest of us would have paid for, and he came to Ione's house maybe twice a year, on holidays, to eat and be adored and leave. But I came on Saturdays. From the time I was 7, my mother would drop me on Marren Lane because I was a lot. Her word, said with a sigh, and because Ione was the only one with the patience for her. So I grew up in that kitchen. I know it the way you know your own hands. The window over the sink that fogged when she boiled water. The lilac that scratched the glass in April and dropped petals on the sill like it was leaving them for me. The particular groan of the 3rd stair. The drawer that stuck. The clock that ran 4 minutes fast because Ione liked being early to everything, including, she said, her own death. She taught me to make bread, kneading my small hands under her big ones, telling me the dough would tell me when it was ready if I'd only be patient enough to listen. And she taught me to read a contract, of all things, because she'd been a legal secretary for 31 years and believed that a woman who couldn't read the fine print was a woman standing in the road waiting to be robbed. People sign things they haven't read, Ellery. She told me once, flour to the elbows, the afternoon light going gold across the counter, and then, when it's taken from them, they act surprised. Don't you ever be surprised. I was 11. I nodded like it was a recipe. I did not understand that she was handing me a weapon and teaching me how it worked. She knew exactly what she was doing. She always did. She had a way of talking about my mother, too, that I only understood much later. Never unkind. Never a word against her own daughter. But once, when I was maybe 14 and had come to her in tears because Dax had gotten a car for his birthday and I had gotten a card, Ione set down her tea and looked at me for a long time and said, "Some people love what shines, sweetheart. It's not a sin, exactly, but it means the ones who don't shine have to learn to see themselves because they won't get it in the mirror of somebody else's eyes." I didn't want a philosophy lesson. I wanted a car, but I never forgot it, and it turned out to be the truest thing anyone in my family ever said to me. She was describing the whole rest of my life, and she was arming me for it, one Saturday at a time. When I was 26, Ione's hands started to shake, and she got frightened in the way careful people do, not of dying, but of leaving a mess for someone to trip over. "I'm getting organized, Ellery," she said, "before the getting is hard." She meant it as a joke, and it wasn't one. One October afternoon, she sat me at the kitchen table, poured 2 cups of the tea she liked that smelled like oranges and wood smoke, and put a single sheet of paper in front of me. Cream paper, good stock. She'd kept a ream of it from the old firm. And on it, in the tight, upright hand I would know in a crowd of 10,000 in blue ink, was this: Asterisk to my granddaughter, Ellery Vance, I leave my home at 14 Marren Lane and everything of me that is in it. It was always going to be yours. You are the one who stayed. Asterisk. She had signed it. She had dated it. And because she was Ione, and because 31 years in a law office teaches you what makes paper stick, she'd had 2 of her old friends from the firm come by that morning and sign as witnesses beneath her name, with the date in their own hands. "Put it somewhere safe," she said, sliding it toward me across the wood. "Not with the fancy lawyers, with you." I asked her why not just make a will, a real one, the normal way. She smiled the particular smile that meant she was already 3 moves ahead of me and enjoying it. "Because your mother will contest a will she doesn't like," she said, "and it will take years, and she will wear you down until it isn't worth it to you anymore. That's how they win, not by being right. By being tiring." She tapped the paper. "This is a different kind of insurance. Cleaner, you'll understand when you have to, not before." I folded it into the zip pocket of my winter coat. I did not understand for 4 more years. And then, one February, I had to. Ione died on a Tuesday in February, quietly in the yellow house, in her own bed, which is exactly what she wanted and exactly how she planned it, right down to the do not resuscitate order she'd signed and filed and told 3 people about. She was 84. The lilac was still bare. There was still snow on the sill. 2 days before, she'd called me. I was at work and I was busy and I let it go to voicemail, and I have never once forgiven myself for that, and I have also never deleted it. Her voice on it is thin but certain, the voice of someone saying a thing on purpose, for the record. Asterisk, Ellery, it's your grandmother. I want to say it out loud, so it said, so there's no confusion later. The house is yours, sweetheart. I fixed it so it's yours. Don't let anyone tell you different, and don't let them make you feel small for wanting what's yours. Wanting what you were promised isn't greed, no matter who says it is. I love you. Come Saturday and bring the good butter, the Irish kind, not the other. Asterisk. I saved that voicemail to 3 places the week she died: my email, a cloud drive, a little audio file on my laptop, because some animal part of me already knew I would need it before my grieving part had caught up. I didn't tell myself why. I just did it, the way you lock a door in a house you don't yet know is on fire. I listened to it once, the night after she died, sitting on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets, and then I made myself stop because I understood, even in that first raw grief, that it was not only a keepsake. It was a record, and you don't wear out a record by playing it. So I put it away and I didn't listen again for a long time, and knowing it was there, intact, her voice preserved and certain, asterisk, I fixed it so it's yours, asterisk, was a kind of hand on my shoulder through everything that came after. She had said it out loud on purpose. She told me she was saying it on purpose. Even dying, she was thinking 3 moves ahead of the people who would try to take it from me, and she was right about every single one of them. And at the funeral, standing at the graveside in a wind that came sideways off the field and cut through my coat, I heard my mother lean toward my Aunt Ramai and murmur, under the minister's words, "Well, at least the house can finally do some good for the family now." Just that. Warm, even, practical. I kept my eyes on the frozen ground, and I said nothing, and I felt something in me go very quiet and very cold, and stay that way. That was the day I stopped being a person that things merely happened to. Here is the thing about my family that took me 30 years to find the words for. They were never once cruel to my face. Cruelty leaves a mark you can point to, a thing you can name and show to a neutral party. What they did was softer than that, and worse. They simply agreed, warmly, gently, amongst themselves and without ever quite saying it, that I did not really need things, and that Dax did. After the funeral, the story assembled itself at Sunday dinners without anyone ever proposing it out loud, which is how the most permanent decisions in my family always got made. Ione's estate was complicated. The house was a family asset now. Dax's second juice bar had hit a rough patch, which I would only later learn meant he had personally guaranteed a 5-year commercial lease he could not cover for even one. My mother developed a new sentence, and she used it on me the way you'd use a key, gently, in a lock. Family helps family, Ellery, and you've always been so independent. Which is the exact thing people say to you right before they take something and hand it to someone else, so that you'll feel churlish objecting. I nodded. I brought pie. Apple, with the lattice Ione taught me. I let them believe I was the independent one who didn't mind, who didn't need, who would be fine, because being underestimated, I was discovering, is a kind of armor if you can stand to wear it. And on a gray Wednesday that spring, I took a personal day I told no one about, drove 90 minutes into the city, and sat down across a desk from a probate attorney named Sasha Ockhafer at a firm called Halbrook and Crane. I put my grandmother's letter on the desk, and I put my phone beside it with the voicemail queued up, and I asked one question. If someone in my family eventually tried to sell this house without me, what would I need to stop them, and when would I need to use it? Sasha read the letter twice. She played the voicemail with her eyes closed. Then she looked at me for a long, appraising moment, the way I imagine a surgeon looks at an X-ray, and she said, "Whoever wrote this letter understood the law better than most lawyers." I said, "She was a legal secretary for 31 years. Sasha almost smiled. "Then here's what you do," she said. "For now, nothing. You do nothing at all, and you keep doing nothing until they've gone very, very far." I understood her completely. Ione had raised me, it turned out, for exactly this conversation. Sasha explained it to me the way Ione would have, slowly, in plain words, treating me like someone who could hold a hard idea without dropping it. The letter witnessed, specific, naming me and the address and the intent, was not nothing. Combined with the voicemail, it was, in the language of the law, real evidence of a testamentary gift, and more usefully, grounds for a claim against the property itself and against the estate. But claims, she said, are strongest against people who have already committed, who have already spent, already promised, already built. People who move quietly and let the greedy build tall, she said, tend to win. So let them build. Don't say a word. Let them build it as tall as they possibly can. So I filed one thing, and only one thing, and I filed it so quietly that no one in my family would ever have thought to look for it, because none of them had ever once, in 3 decades, imagined I would fight. Sasha preserved my claim and my standing on the record, at the county, under my name, Ellery Vance, dated a small flag planted deep in the dirt. The kind of document that means nothing to anyone until the day it means everything. It cost me $490. I paid in cash, and I kept the receipt in the same drawer as the letter. Then I did the single hardest thing I have ever done in my life, which was to go home and wait and smile and be helpful and be pleasant and be underestimated on purpose for 11 months. I watched my family talk themselves into a crime in slow motion. I watched them do it warmly, over good food, telling themselves they were kind. And every single week, I brought the pie. I want to be honest about what that cost, because otherwise it sounds like patience, and it wasn't. It was grief with a lock on it. There were nights I sat in my car outside my own apartment for 20 minutes because I couldn't make myself go in and feel the size of the empty rooms. There were Sundays I drove the long way home just so I'd pass the end of Marren Lane and could see from the corner that the lilac was still there even after everything else was being decided about the house without me. I never turned down the street. I just needed to know the lilac was standing. Some weeks, that was the only thing that got me back into that dining room the next Sunday with a pie in my hands and Ione's careful face on mine. And I talked to her, not out loud, not like a seance, nothing dramatic. Just in the kitchen, kneading dough she taught me to knead, I'd say in my head, asterisk, am I doing this right? Asterisk, and every time the answer came back in her voice, dry and certain, asterisk, don't be surprised. Let them build it tall. And for God's sake, use the good butter. Asterisk, so I did. You have to understand Dax to understand why they did it, and why it was always, from the very first, going to end the way it ended. Dax was 36 and had never once in his life felt the floor. That was the whole of it. He was handsome in the specific way that makes strangers volunteer to catch you before you've even started to fall, and he had learned, young, that if he fell there would always be a hand, mom's, dad's, a girlfriend's, a loan officer charmed stupid by that smile. So he never learned the thing the rest of us learn from hitting the ground, which is how to stop falling in the first place. He fell his whole life and called it ambition. His juice bars, called pressed, spelled with 2 colons in the logo and no vowels where you'd want them, were a genuinely terrible idea executed with genuinely magnificent confidence. Cold-pressed everything, in a town that liked its coffee at a diner for $1.50. By that spring, he was $210,000 underwater and had a business partner named Colby, who had begun sending the kind of late-night texts that come just before a lawsuit does. I know the exact number because Dax told me himself at a 4th of July barbecue, 3 hard seltzers deep, his arms slung heavy around my neck, calling me my smart little sister, while he breathed spearmint and confidence into my ear and explained that he was 1 cash infusion away from turning the whole thing around. I said evenly, "That's a lot of money, Dax." He said, it's fine. Mom and Dad believe in me. They said they'd figure something out." And there it was, laid on the picnic table between the potato salad and the ruin, spoken out loud, in July, months before it had a name. The plan. I looked at the sparklers the kids were waving and I said, "That's nice of them." He squeezed my neck. "Family, right?" he said. "Right," I said. They sold the house that October. I know the date. The 9th. I know the price. $382,000, which was well under what the yellow house was worth, because they wanted it fast and quiet and no fuss, and the buyer, a flipper named Ren who paid cash and asked exactly 0 questions, was happy to give them all 3. I know all of this because months earlier I had asked Sasha to set a standing alert on the county property records. And so this is how I found out that my grandmother's home had been sold out from under me. A notification, on my phone, on a Tuesday, at 11:40 in the morning, while I was standing in the dairy aisle of a grocery store holding a package of the good Irish butter. Because it was almost Saturday. Because 30 years of habit doesn't switch off just because there's no longer a Saturday to bring it to. I stood there and read the little gray words twice. Asterisk property transfer recorded. 14 Marren Lane. Asterisk, then I put the butter back on the shelf, carefully, label out, the way Ione stocked her own pantry, and I walked to my car in the parking lot, and I sat down behind the wheel, and I cried exactly once hard, for about 90 seconds, with both hands over my mouth so no one in the next car would see. And then I stopped. I wiped my face with the heel of my hand, and I called Sasha and I said, "It's done, they sold it. October 9th. And she was quiet for a second, and then she said, gently, but I could hear it, the click of a plan going, right? Good, now they can't undo it. Now we let them spend it." That was the part that took the most out of me. Not the sale, the spending, because the money didn't sit. Money like that never sits. It moved. Watching them spend the house was like watching someone burn a photograph album, page by page, to stay warm one cold night. And telling you, as they did it, how good the fire felt, and wasn't it lucky they'd found something to burn. 240,000 of it went straight into pressed. I would have the transfer records later, dated down to the dollar. But even then I could see it in Dax's shoulders, the way a drowning man's shoulders change the second someone throws a rope. He paid off Colby. He signed, and this is the part that mattered most, though he didn't know it, a brand new 5-year lease on a 3rd location, in a strip mall out by the interstate, personally guaranteed. His own name on the line. New signage. A commercial juicer the size of a small car. A delivery van, wrapped bumper to bumper in the double colon logo, that he parked in front of my parents' house like a trophy. My mother, for the first time in her entire careful life, went to Portugal. She sent me a photo of a blue-tiled courtyard with the message asterisk living a little. Asterisk, my father bought a boat, an actual boat, on a trailer, and he named it, and I am not inventing this, asterisk second wind asterisk. And at Thanksgiving, in the low golden light of a table set with things that used to be my grandmother's, her serving platter, her water glasses, the good ones, they toasted new beginnings. Dax stood, glass up, a little damp-eyed, and thanked this family for always showing up for each other. I lifted my glass with everyone else. I smiled. My mother, flushed and happy and lovely in the candlelight, reached across the table and squeezed my hand and said, "See, Ellery, it all worked out in the end. Ione would be so glad the house went to helping the family." And I said, I think about what she'd want all the time. Which was true. Every word I said to them that year was, if you looked at it closely, exactly true. That was the only way I survived saying them. Under the table, in my coat draped over the back of the chair, was the letter. I'd started carrying it again, weeks before, the way you'd carry a smooth stone in your pocket to hold when your hands wanted something to do. I held it under the table, and I smiled at my mother, and I let them build it taller. There was one night I nearly ruined all of it, and I've never told anyone, so I'll tell it here. It was late December, a few weeks after Thanksgiving, and my mother called me on an ordinary Tuesday, and she was crying, and for one cold second I was certain she'd found the claim, that some clerk had mentioned it, that it was over before it began. But that wasn't it. She was crying because she was happy. "I just wanted to hear your voice, Ellery," she said, thick and warm. "It's been such a hard couple of years, and I feel like we've finally come out the other side. All of us together. Your grandmother would be so proud of this family." And she said, "I love you, you know. I don't say it enough. I know I don't." And I stood in my dark kitchen with the phone against my ear and the letter, "God help me," in the drawer 3 feet away, and I nearly told her everything. Not out of mercy, out of exhaustion. Because it would have been so easy, in that one soft moment, to lay it all down and let her comfort me and be, just once, the daughter who got the warm phone call for its own sake. My throat actually opened to say it. "Mom, there's something you need to know." And then I heard Dax's voice in the background of her call, laughing at something on the TV, easy, unbothered, a man who had never once felt the floor. And I remembered the picnic table, and Mom and Dad believe in me, and the butter I'd put back on the grocery shelf. And the moment passed, the way a wave passes, and I closed my throat around the words, and I said, "I love you too, Mom. Get some rest." And I hung up, and I put both hands flat on the cold counter, and I stood there a long time. That was the closest I ever came. I understood, that night, exactly why Ione had told me, "Not before you have to." Because the mercy in you is the very thing they'll use, without even knowing they're using it, to talk you out of what's yours. I let it run. I let it run 4 more months, because Sasha and I had agreed, from the start, on a shape for this thing, and the shape had a specific moment inside it that we were both waiting for. I would move when Dax had committed the most and could unwind the least, when his own name was on the most paper. In the law, they call that leverage. In my family, it was just a Tuesday I was patient enough to wait for. The third press opened in February, almost exactly 2 years to the week after Ione died. Dax posted about it 40 times in 3 days, the ribbon, the crowd, his own grinning face behind the counter. He'd personally guaranteed this lease too, and taken out a separate equipment loan, and worst of all for him, he had told a new investor, a real one this time, a sharp woman named Priya with real money whom he'd charmed at his gym, that the business was debt-clear and growing fast. A lie. A lie built directly on top of my grandmother's house, on top of a sale that was, though he had no idea, already cracked straight down the middle and waiting only for me to decide when to let it fall apart. I went to the opening. I wanted to see it with my own eyes so that later I would never doubt I'd been right to do what I did. I met Priya there by the little display of branded tote bags. She was sharp-eyed and warm, and she shook my hand and said, "You're the sister? Dax says the whole family's completely behind this." I said, "The family's very invested, yes." She laughed easily. I did not. That night I texted Sasha 2 words, "It's time." And she texted back one, "Finally, We did not ambush anyone. Ione would have hated a scene. She thought scenes were what people made instead of arguments they could win. And besides, Sasha was very clear on the strategy. A scene is emotional, and emotion is precisely the place where the person holding the documents can be shamed or shouted or guilted into folding them back up. So, no dinner table reveal. No confrontation they could later describe to relatives as Ellery finally losing it. Poor thing. Always was a lot. Just paper. Cold, dated, witnessed, authenticated paper arriving in the mail on an ordinary Monday. On a Monday in March, 3 envelopes went out on Halbrook and Crane letterhead. 1 to my parents. 1 to Wren, the buyer. 1 to the title company that had insured the sale. The letter inside laid out, without a single adjective, the following facts in order. That a valid claim to the property at 14 Marren Lane had been preserved and recorded under the name Ellery Vance, dated 11 months before the sale. That the property had therefore been sold subject to that recorded claim, whether or not the sellers had disclosed it, which they had not. That the sale was, accordingly, encumbered and quite possibly void. And that supporting all of this was a witnessed testamentary letter in the decedent's own hand, plus an authenticated voicemail recording, copies available on request. It requested a meeting. It named a number, the full $382,000, plus interest, plus fees, or, failing that, the return of the house itself, which by then Wren had already gutted to the studs, and which no living person could give back. My mother called me 11 times that day. I watched her name light up my phone 11 times, and I let every one of them go. I have kept those voicemails too, though I've never listened past the first. I answered only the 12th call, which came at 9:14 that night, and it wasn't her. It was my father. And his voice had a thing in it I had never heard from him in 34 years of being his daughter, a thing I hadn't known his voice could do. Fear. "Ellery," he said, "what did you do?" And I said the only thing I had been waiting, quietly, for 2 years to be able to say. I said, "I read the fine print." They wanted to meet at my parents' house, at the kitchen table, over food, warmly, the way we had always settled things, which is to say the way they had always worn me down. I said no. I said we would meet at Halbrook and Crane, in a conference room, with a window and rain running down it, with Sasha at my right hand and a court reporter at the end of the table, and they could bring whomever they liked. They brought a lawyer named Mr. Pruitt, a soft, anxious man who had clearly read our file over the weekend and slept badly on it, because he wouldn't meet my eyes and he kept squaring his papers with both hands. My mother had been crying. Her makeup was careful over it, but I knew her face. My father looked, for the first time, genuinely old, like the sale had aged what the funeral hadn't. And Dax came in 10 minutes late, in a pressed quarter zip, already talking before he'd pulled out a chair, about family, about how surely we could keep this in-house, about how Grandma would be absolutely horrified to see us tearing each other apart like this. I let him finish. I'd learned that from Ione too. Let them get all the way to the end of the thing they've rehearsed, because a rehearsed man has nothing left after it. When he ran out, Sasha slid 3 things across the table, face up, one at a time, in silence. A certified copy of the letter, in Ione's blue upright hand. A printed, authenticated transcript of the voicemail. And the recorded claim, with its date circled, 11 months before their sale, sitting there on the table between us like a small headstone. "Ione did leave the house to me," I said. My voice was level. I was proud of that for her. "She just knew you'd never honor a will you didn't like, you'd fight it for years until I gave up, and we all know that's true. So she gave me something you couldn't fight instead, and she taught me to wait until fighting was pointless. That day is today." Mr. Pruitt cleared his throat and started to say something about the authenticity of the handwriting. And Sasha slid one more page across the table without a word. The affidavit from the handwriting examiner, and beneath it the notarized statements from Ione's 2 witnesses, both still living, both perfectly willing to swear to what they'd watched her sign. Mr. Pruitt read it. Then he took off his glasses and folded them and turned to my father and said, quietly, the truest thing said in that room all day, "Warren, I think you should listen to what she's asking for, because your alternative is considerably worse." My father did not answer him. He was looking at the copy of the letter, at Ione's blue upright hand, like it was something that had come back from the dead to sit at the table with us. In a way it had. My mother whispered, "You could have just told us, Ellery. We could have talked about it as a family." And I felt the last of the careful thing in me come loose, quietly, like a knot I'd been holding for 2 years finally slipping free. "I did tell you," I said. "For 30 years I told you, every Saturday. You just decided, all of you together, that I didn't count enough to listen to." My mother started to cry, and this time I didn't reach across the table, because I finally understood that reaching across the table was the whole habit that had cost me the house. Dax said, "Ellery, come on." But there was nothing behind it, no engine, and he heard it too, and he stopped. Nobody at the table had a single real word to say. The rain went on down the window, and the court reporter's fingers went on, quietly, putting all of it on the record, forever, exactly the way Ione would have wanted. It resolved the way Sasha had told me, at the very first meeting, that it would, which is to say expensively, thoroughly, and entirely in my direction. Because the law, when you finally get it on the table, does not care who your mother loves best. The title company, staring down a defective sale it had foolishly insured, was not one bit sentimental about my family. It saw a liability, and it moved to cover itself by going after the people who had sold what was never theirs to sell. Wren wanted his money whole, and Wren's lawyers wanted someone to bleed for it, and the only someones were my parents and my brother, the sellers of record. The full $382,000 had to be made whole, plus the interest, plus the fees, and the house itself was simply gone, torn down to the studs, unrestorable, so there was no giving it back to soften a single dollar of it. My parents refinanced their own home to cover their share. I heard about it third hand. No one told me directly, but I hadn't expected them to. My father sold the boat first, asterisk second wind asterisk went for less than half of what he'd paid to a man 2 towns over, and I heard my father didn't watch it leave the driveway. My mother did not go back to Portugal. Dax couldn't cover his share at all, because his share of the money was already smoothies in a strip mall. The dominoes went the way over-leveraged things always go once the first one tips. The equipment loan on the 3rd location called in, then the personally guaranteed lease, then his name on all of it, exposed, with no house left underneath to hold it up. Pressed 3rd location closed in June, 4 months after its ribbon, the wrap still bright on the windows when they papered them over. Then the 2nd closed. Then the 1st. Priya, the real investor, learned that the business had never once been debt clear, and this was the part that undid him more than any dollar of it. She didn't even sue. She just told everyone she knew, calmly, at dinners and at the gym and at the good coffee place, and in a small city that is a far worse thing than a lawsuit, because a lawsuit ends and a reputation doesn't. Colby resurfaced with lawyers of his own. And the delivery van, the wrapped one with the double colon, got repossessed off the street on a Wednesday, from a spot I happened to be driving past on my way to nowhere in particular. I saw the tow truck hook it and drag it up onto the flatbed at an angle, the double colon tilting toward the sky. I did not slow down. I did not speed up either. I just drove, and I felt, God help me, almost nothing, which surprised me more than rage would have. And I did not keep a single dollar of it for myself. I want that on the record, because it is the question people always ask, the first question, every time. My grandmother's house was gone, and no amount of money was going to rebuild the 3rd stair or the fogging window or the lilac, so I directed my portion, every cent I was legally owed, to the Little Branch Library 4 blocks from Marren Lane, in the name of Ione Marren, to endow a reading room. She would have laughed at that, right out loud. She always said the single most dangerous thing you can put in a person's hand is a library card. There is one more scene, and it's the one I actually replay, more than the conference room, more than the tow truck, more than the number. My mother caught up to me in the parking garage afterward, in the gray light between the concrete pillars, her heels loud and fast on the ramp behind me. When I turned, she was not crying anymore. Her face had gone hard and certain in a way I recognized, because it was the face she'd worn at the funeral. "You've torn this whole family apart, Ellery," she said. "I hope the house was worth it to you." And I found, standing there, that I felt no triumph at all. I'd expected to. I thought there'd be some hot rush of it, some settling of a scale. Instead, there was only a very old and very clean sadness, the kind you can finally see the bottom of. "It was never about the house, Mom," I said. "It was about being the one who stayed and being treated my whole life like the one who didn't matter. The house was just the only thing big enough to measure that in." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out of it. "Grandma left me the house," I said, "because she saw me. That's all I ever wanted from any of you. Not the house. You could have just seen me and none of this would have happened." She didn't follow me to my car. Somewhere above us, a fluorescent tube was buzzing and flickering, going, and I remember thinking, with a small and terrible tenderness, that Ione would have wanted someone to fix it before it started a fire. We are not a family anymore, not in the way the word wants to mean, and I have made my slow peace with the exact shape of that absence. My father sends a card at Christmas, signed only Dad. No note, which is somehow more honest than anything he managed to say to me in 34 years. Dax works at a gym now, actual salaried employment, checking membership cards, and the people who see him say he's quieter, steadier, better for it, and I hope that's true. I never wished him ruin. I only ever wished him consequences, and it turns out those are very different things, and that most of my family had never once let him tell them apart. My mother and I do not speak. For a long time, I braced for that to feel like an open wound. It doesn't. It feels like a window I finally stopped standing in front of, waiting to be let in from the cold. People hear this story and they want me to say I regret it, or else they want me to say it felt good, and I can't give them either one, because the truth is quieter than both. I don't regret it. Ione handed me the truth, in writing, witnessed, and dated, and I refused to let them make me feel like a thief for holding the one thing that was honestly mine. But it didn't feel good, either, the way people mean. It felt like setting down something I'd been carrying so long I'd stopped noticing the weight, and only understood how heavy it had been once my hands were finally empty. I grieved the family I thought I could earn my way into by being good enough, quiet enough, useful enough. That family was never real. It was a lobby I sat in for 30 years, holding a pie, waiting for a door that was only ever painted on the wall. Walking out of it was the loss. It was also the first free breath I ever took. The reading room opened last month. There's a small brass plaque beside the door, and I chose the words myself, and the words are, * the Ione Marren reading room for the ones who stay. * I went to the opening alone and stood at the back where no one would notice me, and there was a little girl, maybe 7, sitting cross-legged in the corner with a book much too big for her lap, sounding out the words with her whole serious face, her lips moving. And I had to step outside into the cold before I embarrassed myself in front of strangers. I still have the letter. I had it framed, not the original. The original lives in a safe deposit box because Ione did not raise a fool, but a good clean copy in her upright blue hand. * you are the one who stayed. * it hangs in my own kitchen now, over my own sink, where there's a window, because that is exactly where it belongs. Some Saturdays I make her bread, her recipe, my small hands grown into big ones. I use the good butter, the Irish kind, not the other. And I am not surprised by anyone anymore, not by cruelty dressed up as family, not by warmth that costs you everything, which is the last thing she ever gave me, and in the end, the only inheritance that was ever really going to matter.